This is what he gets? For being your son's child? That's what she said, loud enough for everyone at the table to hear. She didn't even try to hide the disgust in her voice as she pushed that small, crumpled package toward my son. I didn't react. I just watched. My name is Danielle. I'm 32 years old, married to Eric for 7 years, and I learned very early that his mother wasn't the kind of woman who treated people equally. Still, I believed that if I stayed respectful, if I stayed calm, things would balance out over time. I thought she just needed to get used to me. I was wrong. That afternoon was supposed to be a simple family gathering. Birthdays, laughter, kids running around the backyard, wrapping paper everywhere. The kind of day where everything looks perfect from the outside. But I had already noticed the pattern long before that moment. The other grandchildren always received more. Better toys. Brighter smiles from her. Longer hugs. And my son? He got whatever was left. At first, it came in small ways. A forgotten gift. A delayed happy birthday. A quick side hug instead of the warmth she showed the others. I told myself not to overthink it. I told myself families were complicated. I told myself it wasn't intentional. But then came the comments. Oh, he's different, isn't he? Maybe he just needs more discipline. Some children are just not raised the same. She would say these things with a soft smile, like she was offering advice, like she wasn't slowly drawing a line between my child and the rest of the family. And every time, I stayed quiet. Not because I didn't care, but because I was watching. That day, though, she didn't bother pretending anymore. The living room was full. Her daughters were there, their kids laughing as they opened expensive gifts. Tablets, brand-name sneakers, big colorful boxes that filled the entire floor. Everyone clapped. Everyone smiled. She was glowing, soaking in the attention like she always did. Then it was my son's turn. She reached into a plastic grocery bag, not even wrapped, not even trying, and she handed him a small crushed box of cookies. I saw it before he even opened it. The packaging was faded, edges soft like it had been sitting somewhere too long. He looked at me before opening it. Just for a second. That quiet look children give when they're unsure if something is right. I nodded gently. Go ahead, baby. He opened it. The smell hit first. That stale, sour scent that shouldn't come from something meant to be eaten. The cookies inside were discolored, some broken, some clearly past their time. Even from where I sat, I could see it. And so could everyone else. But no one said anything. Not her daughters, not my husband, not a single person at that table. She just smiled. Well, I didn't think he'd care much for anything fancy, she said casually. Kids like him usually don't. Kids like him. I felt something shift inside me right then. Not anger. Not yet. Something colder. Something quieter. My son didn't say a word. He just closed the box slowly and placed it beside him. He didn't cry. He didn't complain. He just sat there, smaller than he was 5 minutes before. And that was the moment I stopped making excuses for her. I didn't confront her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't give her the reaction she was clearly expecting. Instead, I smiled. A small, controlled smile. Because in that exact moment, I understood something very clearly. She believed there would be no consequences. She believed she could draw that line as boldly as she wanted, and no one would ever challenge it. She believed wrong. I spent the rest of that afternoon observing. Every laugh, every glance, every detail. The way she leaned toward the other grandchildren. The way she avoided even looking at my son after that. The way my husband stayed silent, staring at his phone like none of it had happened. And I said nothing, because I wasn't going to fight her in a room where she felt powerful. I was going to wait. I was going to choose the moment. And when that moment came, I wasn't going to raise my voice. I was going to change everything. I didn't bring it up on the way home. Not to my son, not to my husband. The car was quiet, but it wasn't a peaceful kind of quiet. It was heavy. The kind that presses against your chest and makes every small sound feel louder than it should. My son sat in the back seat holding that same little box on his lap, like he still didn't know what to do with it. He didn't open it again. He didn't ask questions. And that silence from him, it stayed with me longer than anything she said that day. Eric glanced at me once, like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. He just looked back at the road and kept driving, like pretending nothing had happened would somehow make it disappear. I let him. I wasn't ready to talk yet, because I knew if I opened my mouth too soon, it wouldn't come out the way I needed it to. And this wasn't something I wanted to handle with emotion. This was something I needed to handle with precision. That night, after I put my son to bed, I walked into the kitchen and placed that box on the counter. I opened it again, slowly this time, taking in every detail. The expiration date had passed months ago. The cookies were hard, some with visible spots that shouldn't be there. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't something she grabbed last minute without noticing. This was intentional. Careless at best. Cruel at worst. Eric walked in behind me, saw what I was looking at, and sighed like he already knew where this was going. "Danielle," he started, but I raised my hand before he could finish. I wasn't going to let him soften it. Not this time. I looked at him and said, calm and clear, "Your mother gave our son expired food, in front of everyone, after giving the other kids expensive gifts, and you sat there." He didn't respond right away. He just rubbed his face, like the weight of it was finally starting to hit him now that we were alone. "She didn't mean it like that," he said quietly. And that was when I realized the real problem wasn't just her. It was the space she had been given to act this way for years without consequence. I didn't argue with him. I didn't need to. Instead, I closed the box, pushed it gently toward him, and said, "Then you eat one." He looked at the box, then back at me, and didn't move. The silence stretched between us again, but this time it was different. This time, it was uncomfortable for him. Good. He needed to feel that. "That's what she gave him," I continued, my voice still steady. "That's what you watched happen." He shook his head, stepping back slightly, like the idea itself made him uneasy. Okay, I see your point," he muttered. But seeing my point wasn't enough. Understanding wasn't enough, because nothing changes when people just understand. Things change when people decide they're no longer willing to accept what they've been tolerating. And I could tell he wasn't there yet, but I was. Over the next few days, I didn't mention his mother again. Not once. I went about my routine like everything was normal, took my son to school, helped with homework, cooked dinner, handled everything the way I always did. But inside, I was paying attention, not just to her, but to everyone. The way Eric avoided bringing her up, the way he hesitated every time his phone lit up with her name, the way my son didn't ask when we were going to see Grandma again. That one hurt more than I expected, because kids don't usually pull away on their own unless something inside them tells them they're not safe being close. And I refused to let him grow up thinking that kind of treatment was something he just had to accept. 3 days later, she called. I saw her name on Eric's phone while it was sitting on the table. He was in the shower, and the phone kept vibrating over and over again, like she wasn't used to being ignored. I didn't answer it. I didn't need to. I already knew what kind of conversation she wanted to have. She wasn't calling to apologize. She was calling to maintain control, to act like nothing happened, to make sure everything stayed exactly the way she liked it. When Eric came out and saw the missed calls, he looked at me for a second, then picked up the phone and stepped into the other room. I didn't follow him. I just listened to the low murmur of his voice from a distance. Short responses, long pauses. That told me everything I needed to know. When he came back, he looked different. Not angry, not defensive, just thoughtful. Like something had shifted, even if only slightly. "She wants us to come over this weekend," he said. I nodded once, like I was considering it, even though I had already made my decision the moment I saw that box on the table days earlier. "We'll go," I said calmly. He looked surprised. I could see it in his eyes. He expected resistance. He expected an argument, but I wasn't going to give him that, because this wasn't about avoiding her anymore. This was about facing her, on my terms. The night before we were supposed to go, I prepared everything quietly. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a way anyone would notice if they walked into the room, but every detail mattered. Every step had a purpose. I didn't rush. I didn't second-guess myself, because I knew exactly what I was doing. This wasn't revenge in the way people usually think about it. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to insult her. I wasn't going to create a scene that could be dismissed as me being too sensitive or overreacting. No. I was going to do something much more effective. I was going to show her that actions have weight, and that some moments don't get forgotten. When we arrived at her house the next day, everything looked the same on the surface. The same driveway, the same front door, the same sound of laughter coming from inside before we even knocked. But I wasn't walking into that house as the same person who left it days before. I held my son's hand a little tighter as we stepped inside, and I felt him squeeze back, like he sensed something was different too. She greeted us with that same smile, like nothing had happened, like she hadn't already crossed a line she couldn't uncross. And I smiled back, because she still had no idea what was coming. She hugged Eric first, like she always did, holding on to him just a second longer than necessary, as if she needed to remind everyone in the room that he was still hers before anything else. Then she looked at me, gave me that same tight smile, and leaned in for a quick, distant embrace that barely counted as contact. When she finally turned to my son, her expression softened, but not in the way a grandmother's should. It was polite, controlled, measured. "Oh, you came," she said, like there had been a real possibility we wouldn't. My son nodded quietly, staying close to me, his small hand still wrapped around mine. I didn't let go. Not yet. The house was already full. Her daughters were there again, their kids scattered across the living room floor, surrounded by toys, new ones, bright ones, expensive ones. I noticed them immediately, the same way I had noticed everything the last time. Only now I wasn't questioning it. I was confirming it. Every detail fit exactly where it was supposed to in the picture she had been painting for years. Favoritism wasn't an accident in that house. It was a system. "Dinner's almost ready," she announced, walking back toward the kitchen without waiting for a response, assuming, like always, that everyone would simply follow her lead. I let the others move ahead of us. I stayed back for just a second, kneeling slightly so I could look my son in the eyes. "Stay with me, okay?" I said softly. He nodded again. No hesitation, no questions. That quiet trust. It grounded me even more. We took our seats at the table, the same table where just days before she had placed that box in front of him without a second thought. I sat in the same chair. I wanted that. I wanted the symmetry. I wanted her to feel it, even if she didn't understand why yet. Plates were passed around, food served generously to everyone. She made a point of offering second portions to the other kids, asking what they liked, laughing at their answers, engaging in a way that felt warm if you weren't paying attention to who was being left out. When it came to my son, she placed his plate down last. Smaller portion, less care. It was subtle. So subtle that someone not looking for it might miss it completely. But I didn't miss anything. "Is that enough for him?" I asked calmly, my voice cutting through the noise just enough to be noticed. She looked at me, surprised, not by the question itself, but by the fact that I asked it out loud. "Oh, he doesn't eat much, right?" she replied quickly, brushing it off with a small laugh. I tilted my head slightly, holding her gaze. "He eats just fine," I said, just as calmly. No anger, no edge, just a simple correction. The kind that doesn't leave room for interpretation. There was a brief pause at the table. Small, almost invisible, but it was there, and she felt it. Dinner continued, but something had shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to create a slight tension under the surface. She talked a little more than usual, filled the silence faster, like she was trying to regain control of the atmosphere. But control doesn't come back once it starts slipping. Not completely. After dinner, as everyone moved back into the living room, I stayed behind for a moment. I gathered my son's plate along with a few others and carried them into the kitchen. She was already there, rinsing dishes, her back turned to me. For a second, neither of us spoke. The sound of running water filled the space between us. Then she broke the silence. "You didn't have to say that at the table," she said, not turning around. Her tone wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive, but it wasn't kind either. It was controlled irritation, the kind that comes from someone who isn't used to being questioned. I set the plates down gently beside the sink. "I said exactly what needed to be said," I replied. She turned then, slowly, drying her hands with a towel, her eyes locking onto mine. "You're making something out of nothing," she said. "It was just food. You're too sensitive about these things." Too sensitive. That word again. The same word people use when they want to dismiss something without actually addressing it. I nodded once, like I was considering her perspective. Then I reached into my bag. I pulled out the box. The same box. I placed it carefully on the counter between us. For the first time since we walked into that house, her expression changed completely. Not dramatically. Not in a way anyone in the other room would notice. But I saw it. That flicker of recognition. That brief, unguarded moment where she realized exactly what she was looking at. "I kept it," I said quietly. She didn't respond. Didn't move. Didn't even blink right away. I wanted to make sure I wasn't imagining things. I continued, my voice still steady, still calm. I wanted to be sure that what I saw that day was real. Her jaw tightened slightly. "It was just an old box," she said finally. "I must have grabbed it by mistake." I nodded again. Then I opened it. Right there, in front of her. The smell filled the space immediately, stronger now in the quiet of the kitchen. There was no hiding it. No pretending it was fine. No way to soften what it clearly was. I picked up one of the cookies and held it gently between my fingers. "Then eat one," I said. Not louder, not sharper, just clear. Her eyes flicked from the cookie to my face, then back again. For a second, she looked like she might say something, deflect, argue, dismiss, but nothing came out, because there was nothing to say. The truth was sitting right there between us, visible, undeniable. And for the first time since I had known her, she had no control over it. She didn't take the cookie. She didn't even reach for it. Her hand stayed still against the counter, fingers slightly tense, like moving them would somehow make the situation more real than it already was. For a brief second, I saw something I had never seen in her before. Not anger, not superiority, not control.
Uncertainty. It was small, almost invisible, but it was there, and that was enough. I slowly placed the cookie back inside the box and closed it. Not with force, not with drama, just a soft, deliberate motion that made it clear I wasn't there to argue. I was there to show. You wouldn't give this to anyone else in that room, I said quietly, but you gave it to him. She finally looked up at me, her expression tightening again as she tried to rebuild that wall she always hid behind.
"You're blowing this out of proportion," she replied, but her voice didn't carry the same certainty as before. It was thinner, less stable. I shook my head once, slowly. "No," I said. "I've been minimizing it for too long." That silence returned again, heavier now, pressing into the space between us. But this time, I didn't fill it. I let it sit. I let her feel every second of it. From the living room, I could hear laughter. Loud, careless, unaware of what was happening just a few steps away. That contrast made everything sharper, clearer. "This isn't about cookies," I continued. "You know that." She crossed her arms, a defensive reflex she probably didn't even realize she had. "Then what is it about?" she asked, her tone trying to sound firm again. I met her gaze without hesitation. "It's about the way you decide who matters more," I said. No accusation in my voice, just truth, simple, direct, unavoidable. She opened her mouth, ready to deny it, but I didn't give her the space to twist it. "I've watched it for years," I added. "The gifts, the attention, the way you speak to him versus the others, the way you look at him." Her face shifted again, this time with a hint of frustration creeping in. "I treat all my grandchildren the same," she said quickly, but even she didn't sound convinced. I let out a small breath, not a sigh of exhaustion, but one of decision. "No," I said. "You don't." I picked up the box again, holding it for just a moment before placing it back down exactly where it had been. "And the problem isn't just what you did," I continued. "It's that you thought no one would ever hold you accountable for it." That landed. I could see it in the way her posture shifted, just slightly. Not a collapse, not an admission, but a crack. Small, but real. "So what now?" she asked, her voice lower this time, less certain, less in control. That question, that was the moment everything I had been holding back finally aligned into something clear. Not emotional, not reactive, just precise. "Now," I said, "things change." She frowned slightly, like she didn't understand what that meant. Or maybe she understood too well and didn't like it. "If you want to be part of his life," I continued, "you treat him the same. No exceptions. No excuses. No mistakes." My voice never rose. It didn't need to. "And if you can't do that," I paused, just long enough for the weight of the next words to settle before I even said them, "then you won't be part of it at all." For the first time since I had known her, she didn't interrupt. She didn't argue. She didn't dismiss. She just stood there, looking at me, processing something she had clearly never been forced to face before. The possibility that her access wasn't guaranteed. That being the grandmother didn't give her unlimited permission to act however she wanted without consequence. "You wouldn't do that," she said finally. But it didn't sound like a challenge. It sounded like doubt, like she was trying to convince herself more than me. I held her gaze, steady and unshaken. "Watch me," I replied calmly. I didn't wait for a response after that. I didn't need one, because this wasn't a negotiation. It wasn't a discussion. It was a boundary. Clear, firm, final. I picked up the box one last time, turned, and walked out of the kitchen without looking back. The sound of laughter in the living room hit me again as I stepped in, but this time it felt different, lighter. Not because anything around me had changed, but because I had. My son looked up at me the moment I entered, his eyes searching my face the way children do when they're trying to understand something they can't put into words. I walked over to him, knelt slightly, and placed my hand gently on his shoulder. You ready to go? I asked softly. He nodded immediately. No hesitation. No questions. Just trust. Eric looked between us, then toward the kitchen, then back at me. He could tell something had happened. Something important. But he didn't ask. Not there. Not in front of everyone. And for once, that silence from him didn't frustrate me. Because now, whether he was ready or not, things had already changed. We said our goodbyes quickly. No long conversations, no lingering. She didn't come out to stop us. She didn't call after us. And that told me more than anything she could have said. As we walked to the car, I felt my son's hand slip into mine again. This time, his grip was a little stronger, a little more certain. And that was all I needed to know I had done the right thing. I wasn't interested in humiliating her. I wasn't interested in revenge the way most people think about it. What I wanted was simple: respect. And if that couldn't be given freely, then it would be required, or the relationship wouldn't exist at all. Some people think staying silent means being weak, but they don't understand that silence, when used the right way, isn't submission. It's preparation. And when the moment finally comes, you don't need to be loud to be heard. If you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting your child, then you already know which one matters more. And if you understand that, subscribe to the channel because there are more stories like this waiting for you.